7 months ago, Queasy won the Fortnite Global Championship, the most prestigious tournament in the whole game. And now, he's been eliminated from FNCS at the earliest possible opportunity. It's fair to say that over the past few months, not a lot of things have gone right for Queasy. He's bounced between a ton of teammates, he's struggled for placements, he got 5-0'd by Vanya in a 1v1, his own car got infested by ants, his cat turned off his PC mid-tournament, that same PC then blew up a few months later. It's fair to say that luck hasn't always been on his side. But how does a player go from being world champion to not even making it past the FNCS play-ins round? Let me break it down for you. Now, the thing you have to understand is that we don't normally have 7-month gaps between major Fortnite tournaments. We have had such a long off-season. And it's tough because yes, we've not had as many important tournaments, but a lot of players have really developed in this time, and Queasy isn't one of them. Let's recap his journey step by step throughout the off-season. Coming out of Globals, Queasy's stocks were at an all-time high. He absolutely dominated on day one of the tournament, winning 3 consecutive games and managing an average placement of 2.33. Because of Queasy's leadership, they had a great strategy that worked for them. They played height consistently and successfully, and they just looked unstoppable. Yes, day 2 was a little bit tougher for them, but they got it over the line, largely thanks to an incredible play in game 11, where they snuck up on the second place team of Vanya, Pixie and Marius and took them out of the game. Perhaps if trios was still the competitive mode, there's a world in which Queasy could have built on this result, but of course we did switch back to duos, which left Queasy looking for a teammate, and he picked up his old friend Veno. Now obviously these guys have quite the history together. They of course won FNCS back in Chapter 4 Season 2, where they managed 6 out of 12 wins in the grand finals, which to this day is one of the most dominant performances ever seen. So there were definitely some high hopes for this team. Unfortunately, it did not quite go to plan. The magic from before just wasn't there. In 2025, it looked like Queasy and Veno were not the perfect match for each other. Queasy is someone who likes to take height early on in the late game. He will build up for it. He'll make sure he's the first one there. Veno's philosophy is a little bit different. He prefers to let someone else take height early, and then he will retake it later on in the final moving zones. And ultimately, it was this clash in playstyle that led to them splitting. Veno went off to play with Chino, and Queasy picked up another one of his successful teammates, Thomas HD. Now, of course, these guys have a great history together too. They came second at Globals 2024, only being beaten out by Peterbot and Poyo. No shame there. But just like with Veno, Queasy couldn't recreate the good performances they'd had in the past. For whatever reason, it just wasn't the same anymore. Look, I don't want to be too harsh on Queasy here. This wasn't that long after Globals. He was still in celebration mode. He wasn't fully locked in. And at this point in time, bad placements weren't the end of the world. The issue was that Queasy wasn't developing. He didn't look great with Veno. He didn't look great with Thomas. He then went to NA Central for about a month and played with Curly. And yes, that was only ever temporary, but it was another time period where he wasn't really improving as a player. So by the time he returned to EU, Chapter 7 was about to start. And it's fair to say that in the 2.5 months after Globals, some players had gotten a lot better. They'd improved their playstyles, they'd developed new strategies, they'd increased their chemistry with their teammates, all of this whilst Queasy was still at square one. Going into Chapter 7, this was a chance for Queasy to have a fresh start, a new era, and he chose to pick up the reigning FNCS champion Fridoxy. Now he's someone who had an excellent 2025. He did really well at Globals, managing a 7th place finish with Chino and Pablo, despite the fact they were contested every single game. So this duo was one that did have a lot of potential, but unfortunately, just like Veno, just like Thomas HD, it didn't work out with Fridoxy. They finished outside of the top 1.5k in the $1 million Unreal Cup, which was the main tournament in this period. For whatever reason, these two just didn't gel together. Fridoxy is someone who does like to lead, so it doesn't make a huge amount of sense for him to be playing with Queasy, who is of course a hard IGL. But by the time Queasy and Fridoxy were finished with each other, we were in 2026, and in January, Queasy decided to pick up a very different type of player. He decided to play with Rax, a 14-year-old Italian player, one of the biggest prospects in the whole of EU. And this was a really big deal, as up until this point, Rax had been playing with Seti, and they'd been looking great together. Before then, Rax was with Yanis, they'd been looking good too. He was hot property. Now, this team had some good moments, they got some Victory Cup wins, but ultimately, by the time Divisional Cups came around, they had split, it just didn't work out. And at this point, it was getting a bit concerning. Queasy had churned through a ton of teammates, all with very different playstyles, and he didn't seem to fit with any of them. But listen, what if he picked someone up that he was very used to playing with? What if he played with someone that he had recent experience with? I am of course talking about Swizzy. He chose to play with his Globals winning teammate for the Reload Elite Series tournament. They did qualify for the heats the first time. Unfortunately, they found themselves in an off-spawn battle over at Fort Crumpet against Thomas HD and Focus, and things did get a little bit heated. Thomas and Focus ended up winning the spawn fight 5-3, but Queasy did win in the final game to ensure that Thomas wouldn't get the top 5 placement needed to make the grand finals. But ultimately, this was another disappointing tournament for Queasy. He needed to return to a tested formula. So at the start of February, he decided to play with his other Globals teammate Merstash for Battle Royale and Reload events. Just like Queasy, Merstash hadn't been that locked in for the past few months after his Globals win, and from the results they had together, it definitely showed. They were only able to qualify for finals in one of the 6 divisional cups that they played together. They even missed out on the Reload Elite Series heats by finishing outside of the top 80 teams. It was a very difficult time for them. And after not making the first divisional cup of season 2, they decided to call it quits with just 1 week until FNCS. At this point, it's been 6 months since Globals, and we have seen duos on EU look so good. You've got the likes of Shark and Teeny, Sky and Scroll, Thomas and Focus. There is no shortage of top quality teams, and Queasy had missed out on all of this time to develop. He had to completely start from scratch, and he decided to pick up Haris, a fellow Balkan player, and this did make a lot of sense. Haris is someone who is a very capable fighter. He had previously been playing with Pink, but they hadn't looked too good together. So honestly, this decision made a lot of sense. They weren't able to qualify for the only divisional cup finals that they played before FNCS. They didn't get off to an immediately good start, but there was still hope going into the play-ins. And that brings us out at the present. How did Queasy and Haris fail to qualify for the FNCS heats? Let's take a look at some of their games. Day 1 was a real struggle. After 11 games, they were in 271st place, way out of contention to qualify. They weren't terrible by any means, but they made a lot of mistakes. Let's take this game as an example. Early on, it's actually looking quite good for them. They land at the south side of Frigid Fortress, and they do take an early game fight in which Queasy hits a beautiful exit piece to secure a double kill. We know Queasy isn't the biggest fan of the new Storm Surge, but they play it perfectly throughout this match. In the 7th zone, they shockwave down to Wonky Land to refarm materials. Queasy is a height player. He's doing this so he can set himself up for a height take later on in the game. Coming into the late game, they find a nice mid-ground layer. It's all looking like it's going well until one misplay undoes all of their hard work. In the first moving zone, they use their overdrive grenades to go for a height retake. Unfortunately, they get sent super high into the air. They're very trackable, and they put themselves on a plate for Seti and Rax. A lot of teams this season have been using the overdrive grenades to do height retakes, but it's fair to say that this play wasn't it. And believe it or not, this wasn't the only game where they messed up using this item. Take this match for example. They've been playing in the Storm for the whole game. They were just about above the Surge threshold. It was looking pretty routine for them, but it only took one mistake for everything to fall apart. In the 6th zone, Queasy messes up a rotate with the overdrive grenade, leaving him exposed. He ends up getting beamed. Haris is left as a solo. He's 600 below Surge, and that spells the end of his game. Yet again, it's not like Queasy and Haris are playing badly, it's just mistakes that are spoiling their games. And this wasn't the only rotation misplay that they made on day 1. Let's take a look at another match. Again, they landed at the south side of Frigid Fortress, and they were able to beat the Polish duo of Matez and Kakpi off spawn. On their rotations, they did get tagged up a bit, but Storm Surge wouldn't prove to be their issue. In the half and half zones, they decide to make a Storm play, rotating early, refarming materials, and using the heals that were available. And this is something that we've seen a ton of from Queasy in the past. He loves tanking Storm in those half and half zones so he can have best positioning when the next zone pulls. However, things didn't quite work out like that in this game. He ends up getting involved in a very unnecessary fight on the edge of zone. As you can see, it is a max distance pull, so this is not ideal. Because of this, they arrive into zone way too late with a target on their back. They end up getting lobby sprayed, and that puts their game to a close. The ideas were there on day 1. Yes, they weren't getting a huge amount of eliminations even in the games that they did well, but ultimately it was just mistakes that were costing them. Going into day 2, Queasy and Haris needed a big performance in order to qualify. And initially we saw some improvements. They were making more end games. They managed a 3rd, a 4th and an 8th inside those first 7 games. They were looking pretty good, except for this clip. This wasn't great. With 3 games of the tournament left, Queasy and Haris were 86 points away from the qualification threshold. That's the equivalent equivalent of an 11 kill win. And that might not sound that unrealistic, but this is where things go a bit wrong. You see, for day 2, they switched their drop spot. They're no longer landing at the south side of Frigid Fortress, they are now landing over at Ripped Tides. In game 9, they land at this spot, they get a couple of eliminations off spawn, but ultimately they are third partied and taken out, meaning they have 2 games left. In game 10, they land at Ripped Tides, they wipe a team off spawn, they get third partied and they are eliminated. And just like that, 2 games are gone. With one final match left, they need 74 points or a 5 kill win to qualify for the FNCS heats. Yet again, they choose to land at Ripped Tides, and this time they are successful off spawn. They wipe out the team that were contesting them, no problems there. From here, they can play out the game normally. They just need to make it to the end game, take height, ensure they have 5 kills and secure the victory royale. It's a lot easier said than done. And unfortunately for Queasy, bad luck strikes again. He chooses to spend time in the storm, refarming materials and using the vending machine to sustain himself with medkits, but this is where disaster strikes. A team lurks up on them and takes out Haris, meaning Queasy has to flee as a solo. Queasy is able to escape with his life and he successfully reboots Haris. From here, they follow the team that snuck up on them into the zone. They manage to make it to Squibbly Shores, where they're able to use the abundance of heals there to return some health. They continue their journey into the safe zone, but this is where things go from bad to worse. Once they arrive to safety, Queasy and Haris are incredibly split. Queasy ends up getting isolated and he gets taken out in a 1v1. Haris arrives too late to do anything about it and he too gets eliminated, ending their hopes of qualification for good. Queasy and Haris needed the perfect game to qualify, but all of their struggles can be traced back to being snuck up on in the storm. That completely derailed the match for them. After 2 days of competition, they finished the tournament in 199th place, 70 points behind the qualification threshold. All they would have needed was a 3 kill win, and when you think back to some of those games on day 1, especially the failed high ground retake against Seti and Rax, that could have been on the cards. It could have been possible. If they didn't make some of those mistakes, if they were able to follow through with just 1 win, then it could have been a very different story. And this takes us to the final point. Where does this leave Queasy? Look, it's worth noting that this isn't the first time that Queasy has won a major tournament and struggled straight after. Back when he managed a 6 out of 12 wins in Chapter 4 Season 2, he then didn't qualify for the subsequent Grands the season after. Some people might say that Queasy has been unlucky with recent metas. Height has been difficult to play lately, even Peterbot would agree with that.
Alright, so Queasy, honestly, I think this meta was just not for you, because you're a height player and this meta is for a bunch of monkeys where they can just shotgun height. So you have no playstyle this season. This meta is not for you.
It's been a difficult time for Queasy. To play with so many top quality players and still struggle, at some point you do have to see him as the common denominator. But listen, all hope isn't lost. There is still a way Queasy could qualify for this season's FNCS Grand Finals. We still have the last chance qualifiers, where there are 5 extra spots for any duo to qualify. If he finishes in the top 50 during Opens, he'll have 5 chances to win a game that would send him to the FNCS Finals. People have made the mistake of counting out Queasy in the past. He is someone that always has one good placement left in him. He's super experienced, he's a great IGL, he's one of the best EU players of all time, and he's never too far away from a great performance. Who knows, maybe it could come sooner than we'd think.